But go ahead and definitely, guys, put your questions in there because this is your chance to get answers. And like I said, this is an AMA, so you are welcome to ask us anything. We will answer as many of them as we can. There's a couple that we can't answer, but we'll do our best. You know, we're at a disadvantage here. Vanilla and I have been talking for 14 hours now, so you know, it's easy to trip us up.
They might get a little silly and say something they, maybe
Yeah,
shouldn't.
that we
Well, he
shouldn't.
already said Michelle was his favorite sports photographer.
Yeah, well, that's just the truth. So, all right. So let's go ahead here and I want to show you how you could have these two products working together. So let me just import a couple of HDR images really quick. So I'm just going to bring a set of HDR images in. And there's many ways to go about that, but we'll just take these here. These look fine. So let me add that in. There we go. So I got a couple of HDR photos. So some of you saw this example before. I'm just using this to illustrate HDR. So if you have a set of HDR images and you're in Luminar AI, one thing you could do is select those images. And, in this case, we've got a bracket series. And there's two things you could do. So there's a little difference here between the Mac and Windows side, although the teams has been eliminating all of those slight differences. And V, you'll have to tell me if this one was gone or still there. There is a file open in Aurora HDR. Is that on the PC version right now? Or are they still adding it in?
You want? I'll pull it up and I'll look.
Yep. So this allows you to force it to open in another app. And if not, you could just right click a lot of times and do the same thing, or say show in Finder and reveal those images and then open them up. There's lots of ways of going about that. You can drag on the dock, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what that's going to do is that's going to hand off those raw files. Now, there is a cool thing that I'd love to see to make this a little bit easier to hand it back. One also question that we had is someone was like, well, I think raw files are better than HDR files. The truth of the matter is a raw file is a 10 to 14-bit image, and an Aurora HDR image is a 32-bit image. So what that means is that there's anywhere between 16 times and 18 times more information in the raw file. So there's nothing that a 32-bit HDR can't do that a raw file can do. You actually have more exposure and flexibility. Now, there's another way of using Aurora HDR, which we showed earlier, which was as the ultimate single image raw processor. It works really well. But, people said, okay, I sent to Aurora, how do I get it back? Well, here's the thing. It's not a perfect workflow right now, but it is getting actually worked on, which is cool. So I'm going to show you the easiest way to do it. And that is we need to save this image in the right spot. So there are cool templates in here to sort of speed things up. You could choose those. My suggestion to get the exposure totally right is take advantage of Smart Tone. Smart Tone really lets you dial in the right exposure without shifting the color. Normally, if we change regular exposure, colors will get more saturated. See that, how the colors got too saturated? Smart Tone is actually really smart and lets you pull that down very nicely. And then you can do highlights, recovery, etc. So this is a very natural looking HDR, minimal clarity or structure. We're just going for photorealistic. Now, if you want to, you can save a native Aurora HDR file. This is a self-contained layered file format. Now you might be saying, well, where do I save that? How do I save that? Well, you're going to need to navigate to where those images were stored. So you can always back in Aurora here, say show in Finder, and kind of figure out that file path. Oh, okay, that's where that's at. So now all I need to do is use that same file path. So that was on my hard drive here, and I can kind of see, where is that at? And it's just going to allow you to navigate back to where you want to store that, right? So now I'm going to save the Aurora HDR file, and this includes the file history plus all the raw files tucked inside. That's great because you could add layers in Aurora. Some folks are like, when's Luminar getting layers? You can do layers in Aurora HDR. They're right here. You could add image layers. You could add adjustment layers to reuse effects. We do have luminosity masks and some of those more advanced things. So Aurora HDR is really designed for super advanced editing, as well as optimizing individual images and bracketed raw files. So that makes it simple here, like I did a nice luminosity mask, making it so much easier to target the sky for additional recovery without affecting the whites. And so hopefully you kind of see how that looks. So there's the native Aurora file, and I've saved that. And then what I would suggest is just export out the high quality version as a TIFF file. So if we export that, I'm going to save it back to the same location. There it is. And I'll save that as a TIFF file. TIFF LZW compression. That's Ludwig, Zeller, and Weilitz or something. It's actually like 3 German names. And it basically means make a smaller TIFF file without noticing that there was compression applied. It's very effective. Always use LZW unless you just really love eating up your hard drive. 16-bit file every day, all day long. This has so much more color information. 8 bits is only for JPEGs, and that's totally a delivery format, not an editing format. Everything else is fine. Just keep it original. You don't have to worry about resolution. You don't have to worry about any of this stuff. Just leave it set on original so you're not changing the size. I would suggest a slight sharpening pass on the export and either Adobe RGB or ProPhoto. Adobe RGB is the easiest color space to work with. ProPhoto is a little more advanced, but don't use sRGB. That's only really for the internet. So I'll save that file. And what it does is it writes the file to disk. That's cool. It's going to put that in there. Hey, no problem. And what's going to happen here is when it's done, here's what's cool. I can go ahead and switch back to Luminar, and it's right there. Look, because it got put into the same folder, Luminar constantly scans that folder, making it simple. So we could actually like take these brackets here and, take those there and just, oh, okay, that's cool. I see those. And then here's the HDR. Luminar always scans the folder, and if you save to it, it's gonna update. So there's the TIFF. Here's another little trick though. If you go on the Mac version, not the PC version, but again, this is one of those things that the team keeps working on. We almost have full compatibility now between Mac and PC. The Mac version, folks, can actually run plugins in Aurora. And you're like, okay, Luminar, Photolemur. Okay, well, how did I get Luminar AI in 4? Well, under the other menu, you could choose Open Plugin. So if you've got Photoshop on your system, you could see the Luminar plugin. It's the PSD plugin. And Angela, I think I got this right? If they reach out to support, they could get the plugin file as a standalone if they prove that they own Luminar, because you have to license Luminar. But then you could run it with things like Topaz and with Aurora, right? You can get the PSD plugin if you need it.
Yep, you can. All you have to do is email support@skylum.com and they will send you that information.
And they can give you instructions on how to use it with Photoshop Elements and things like that. So I'll just say Open Plugin, and you navigate to the plugin file. So, in this case, I would just go to that file that they downloaded, or if you have Photoshop installed, it would have put it in the plugins folder there. And you just select that you want to run Aurora, or in this case, Luminar AI, right? And so look, now I can run Luminar AI inside Aurora HDR. And what it's going to do is still have this standalone single image saved as a layered file with everything intact format, and it will put the results of Luminar on a new layer. So I could use all of those creative editing tools that Luminar offers now that we've got this great advanced image. So I'm going to just jump in here to edit and use some of those things you've learned about today. Hey, let's just pop a little bit of structure. I like that. And, I'm just going to bring out the sky enhancer a little more to get the colors right. And I really love the glows that we learned about. Let's put a little gentle mystical in there. But looking at the blue, it's a little too intense. So using the color block, I could just say, hey, I want to go to the saturation of the blue and just back that off ever so slightly. And looking at that orange boat, I want to go to the luminance and just make that orange boat a touch darker. Perfect. So you could do all these great things that you've learned about to quickly and easily enhance your image. You learned about the amazing super contrast today, so you can really recover those highlights and get just the perfect skies. get more contrast in the shadows, and be able to sort of balance that. John, if you got questions, please put it in the Q&A. We can't open up the mics. And we get that there, and I click apply. And what it does is it sends the results back to Aurora and tucks them on a layer. So I know a couple of you are like, well, why doesn't Luminar AI do this? So Luminar AI is designed to allow you to work with lots of images, libraries, syncing, templates, fast, speed. Aurora is an advanced editor designed to let you really build a single file up and use layers and things that you want. So you can do some pretty cool things with it. And there you see the Luminar AI layer. And so later I could, easily blend that and, back that off, or I could add an adjustment layer. One of my favorite little tricks is this one. I like to put adjustment layers in, and I'll totally strip out the saturation and then make it really crunchy with rich shadows. And then watch this little trick. Soft light. Boom. Now you got rich blacks. It's like a bleach bypass, and you can just blend that into taste to further pop your shadows for rich, pure, dark, crisp blacks. And again, when you're all set, just kick out another file to the same location, and you could save another TIFF, and it's in your Luminar AI library. And, so here we can call this, popped. I'll call this popped image because it's nice and detailed. And I got it. And I can close and save it. So you see there, these tools can work together. Before you put it in the chat, we know they can work together more easily. We kind of thought that HDR might have been going away and be a little bit dead, and HDR just keeps coming back. The reason why it keeps coming back is because people are now learning that you could do some amazing things with it. And I didn't get a chance to watch all of Michelle's presentation, but here's, something just to think about. And that is that, if we've got a raw file that's tough on exposure, we could do some amazing things with Aurora. So instead of developing images with the light tool, there's something to be said about just taking that image into Aurora and letting it do its magic, right? Let me just get rid of these zoom windows here really quick. And so you could take that and just force that into Aurora. And what it's going to do is look inside. In this case, it's a 12-bit raw file. It's going to pull out every shadow, every highlight, every pure white point, pure black point, use AI to analyze all of that detail, and then stitch it back together into a new super file. So here we go. And it's an amazing tool for landscape photography, sports photography, street photography, event photography, when you've got single raw images and you just want to take an extra 15 seconds to say, give me a kick-ass file. Look at that. That was the natural starting point with not a single thing done in Aurora. Look at that detail. And then again, kick it over to Luminar. So I'm sure there's some questions now, hopefully on other things besides this, but these two programs are designed to work together. I had teased this before, but we didn't have time before to show you the Luminar and Aurora workflow. We showed you like the Photoshop and Lightroom handoffs, but here you see how these two tools can hand off to each other.
And to confirm,
There are a
Rich,
couple of-
Windows does not have it.
Okay. So, but you can still run it between the two apps pretty easily by just exporting and then handing back and forth, like I was showing with the right click. Yeah. So you don't have to use the plugins, but that's a feature we'll be exploring more in the future.
Rich, there was a question from Joe about, do you recommend going into Aurora HDR first? I think he might be referring to taking your raw files into Aurora, or do you export with changes from Luminar, or?
So it depends on the style of photo. Like rarely am I going to take a JPEG into Aurora. I only use it for raw files, and I only use it when there's a really tough exposure. So, one, it needs to be raw, and two, it just really needs to feel like it's lacking contrast. So there's no reason to do this. There's quite a bit we could do right here inside of Luminar, right? Like Accent AI is real time. Sky Enhancer is real time, right? That works really nicely. But if you feel like it's still not there, and you feel that urge to go in and play that Tango 2 dance with the light tool where you spend 15 minutes moving every single slider back and forth, and then you go, and maybe if I played with black and whites, and oh, I know I should use curves, and now you're spending 15 minutes trying to get a perfectly exposed photo. That's a great time to just say, and if you're on a PC, this will work, Show and Explorer or Show and Finder, right click, open in Aurora HDR, and let it do its thing. And you could even tell it to remove noise and remove chromatic aberration. So noise is sometimes seen in areas with high contrast or low exposure, or when you have high ISO. And chromatic aberration is seen in really areas of high contrast, where you have a dark image that's backlit or a cheaper lens. So as you're going to see here, for certain styles of photography, product photography, street photography, landscape photography, events photography, I think V, you use this with some of your sports photos, it could do amazing things. Now, in this case, it pushed it too far, but remember, it's not done. Smart tone is amazing to get the tonality right. Then you could just dial that in, and you still have clarity in those other items. And so it makes it simple to kind of dial it into the right place and get a nice even exposure. And then you can hand it off. So it just develops the raw files differently. It's an alternative to using Luminar. And then you can go right back to Luminar for the creative edit. I usually use Luminar most of the time, but Aurora is my secret weapon when either I need to use really advanced layers or I want to do something. It's the same way that most people do most of their editing in Lightroom, but every once in a while they go, you know, I think I need to go to Photoshop. So it's that same sort of relationship. They're complementary. They don't replace each other.
Yep.
Awesome.
Totally agree. All right, well, we do have a good list of questions going on in the Q&A pod. Vanelli, you ready to start diving into some of these and seeing what we can do here? First question here from Dennis. Any chance of getting auto masking? Rich, maybe I can defer to you on that one and see if that's anywhere possible in the future.
Well, anything is possible, but as some of you learned from Eugene today, you know, what happens is they look at what are going to benefit lots of people. So auto masking as you drag is still pretty slow. So what you're going to see more likely are tools that don't even require you to mask, but can recognize things. I'm not going to tell you what those might be, but you know, a good example is like if you look at the Sky AI, how there's human aware relighting. You don't have to select the person. You don't have to paint around the edge of their hair. It just finds the person and allows you to adjust the lighting on the person. Well, that's in one tool. Well, that human aware technology is also in Accent AI. So you're going to start to see that grow and do more. So there's there. Now, have we ever had an edge aware brush? Yeah, we played with it and it was really no better or faster than anybody else's. And so the team is pushing things in a more interesting direction. I understand why you're asking. And that's not to say it won't ever come. The more people request, the more things get looked at. So file those support tickets and it does get looked at. But I think what you're more likely to see are intelligent AI tools that could just look at a picture and just like how we go, oh, those are the lips. Oh, that's the edge of the hair. Oh, that's in the background. This is in the foreground. That's water. If you pay attention to what Sky AI is doing, it's recognizing people, water. It's recognizing the horizon and the angle of the photo and it's transforming it. That's a good sign of things to come. So I can't get myself in trouble there. And the next one, Tyler, we've answered this one a couple of times today. We are actively working on mobile and tablet and other things. So yes, there are plans. Can I tell you what they are? No, other than there's people on payroll working on it.
All right, let's see here. Awesome. I love Joe's question. How do we, and he's referring to Vanelli and myself, how do we manage to find time to shoot photographs and do client work considering the amount of time we spend educating users about Luminar AI? That is a tough one. I have to say that my time behind the camera has been not very much lately. But one of the things I do to keep creatively fresh and motivated is I belong to an awesome camera club. So that gives me ideas and kind of prompts me to get out there to shoot. and I'm around like-minded people, whether it's been, over the past year and a half via Zoom or before that, and hopefully coming up soon, we're getting together and doing more stuff in person. Find a local camera club. That is a great way to stay motivated and engaged.
No, honestly, unlike Rich and Andrew, who both have married, they have spouses, and Rich's children. I just flew out the other day, a few weeks ago. I flew up to Philadelphia, took a photograph of the famous chair in the Eastern State Penitentiary where Al Capone was in, and then flew back the next day, and I was able to do that. Now, if I had a family, that'd be hard, but with Rich's case, I know he takes his children out with him, and his kids are phenomenal photographers at such a young age.
My daughter more so, but yes, like if you can make it a family activity, but it's just like exercise, guys. Like, I make it to the gym 5 days a week now because if I didn't, my health would suffer. So you just got to carve out time for photography, and you just have to set aside time, So, COVID and being locked in our houses has certainly made it hard. Although Vanelli said that, he set up a water drop studio. I've been doing all sorts of weird photography at home. And, I'm going to laugh here, but my daughter knows the exposure triangle better than 95% of the photographers I know out there because she's helped me teach the photography merit badge online to more than 150 members of Scouts BSA. So, you just find time for it and it works out great.
Very awesome.
Good question.
Another great question here, Rich, that you can probably help with. What are the chances of developing a print module?
So let me give you guys an answer on that some of you may not like, but it's actually the same way that Lightroom has gone. And that is, do you know who makes the best print module, Angela?
The one who makes your printer.
Correct. The one who makes your printer, because they all ship software that's amazing that taps into every single feature your printer supports and can do all sorts of great things. And so rather than making a crummy subpar print module, it's better for us to make it easier to output amazing 16-bit TIFF files with the correct color space and sharpening and focus on making that export even faster. I know you're used to print modules, but if you fire up in the new Lightroom, there's no print module. You fire it up the photos for Mac OS, and I used to write the user documentation for the Aperture tool. I worked with that product from the very beginning. They used to have an incredible print module. It doesn't have it. Apple doesn't even let you print books or photos anymore. So the reality is let the people who are going to do your printing do the software. So if you're doing online prints, there's a wealth of great folks out there that make it easy to submit those high quality TIFF files or JPEG Max, and they'll give you settings and color profiles and things to follow. And same thing, use your printer software. I know that that's not the answer some of you want to hear, but the reality is if the team wanted to make amazing printing software, oh, we're making it for Epson, we're making it for Canon, we're making it for Brother, where there's all these different brands and flavors. That's all you're doing is making print software. You're going to rely on the manufacturer. They're going to do a better job. They just are. And so we're going to focus on speed and writing print-ready files. I hope that makes sense.
Great answer. Question from Steven. I'm going to throw this one to Vanelli. It's about sky objects. How do you add multiple sky objects? For example, clouds and a plane. You want to share your screen? And I know you like playing with the augmented sky.
I want a unicorn, V.
no unicorns. Now, let's see. So, all right. So a couple things. One is, let me pull up, and I had all these organized for us. Sky replacement. Okay, so here's a good example. Now, you can only add one sky or one sky object at a time. All right, so this is one of Angela, my favorite. I'm going to click on edit, and the first thing I'll do here is let's just quickly replace the sky. Okay, so we'll bring this guy in here. So I can add a sky to this image to make it look a boring sky like this. Oh, a boring sky like that. Let me pull it back up to make it look a lot more exciting. I am sharing my screen, right?
Yep. You managed to crash the app, V. It's the first time today, and you get the booby prize because Angela didn't crash her computer. I didn't crash my computer. So
You know,
while Vanelli's getting reopened, let me say one thing. So he's showing you a way to do it today. It's kind of like when we're going to answer the watermark question, which always comes up. But let me say this much. If you've been paying attention to any of the surveys that go out and the feedback that goes out, and you've listened to me say that the local adjustment tool is going to continue to get better, guys, it's going to get better. So Vanelli's going to show you how to do it today. But don't think that anybody thinks that this is the best way to do it. It's just the way to do it today. So if you have to do it tomorrow, you can follow Vanelli's instructions. If you have to do it sometime next year, yeah, it'll be easier.
Okay, let's see. And like we said, we'll pop this right in here. Hey, like Rich said, this is how you would do it today. And Rich, you know what? Forgive me. This may be the one image that I corrupted. We'll see if it does. Oh, there it is. And I know, so this, I love where it is here. Now I'm going to come over to Augmented Sky. At first, I wasn't sold on this tool until these birds got in here. And right, Angela, we fell in love with these birds. I love it. I love
well with this photo.
Yeah, for this photo, because it looks like there was somebody behind her, on a mic, and you start cue the birds. All right, on the count of 3, let the birds go. Ready and action. Boom, and all the birds went flying out. But I really love how we can place these objects. And then Rich showed me how to create my own sky objects, which was really cool. Whether you're using it as a ping or as even as a JPEG, it's really cool that I can start adding other things to these scenes. So, but as of right now, you can add one sky or one sky object to the scene.
And then you can export it, bring it back into Luminar, and add another one if you need
Exactly.
to. Again, it's not ideal, but it's a 2-pass or a 3-pass workflow, and it is doable today. But that is going to continue to get easier. And depending upon if you actually need it to mask into the sky, you can also just use the texture overlay feature and add multiple PNG objects there, because that does support PNGs. So you may not need to use Augmented Sky. Depending upon where you're putting it, you might be able to use the texture layer, and that actually supports up to 10 textures. So Augmented Sky has a limit right now, but that's being worked on. But you can add in up to 10 textures with the texture overlays under local adjustments. And those textures can be transparent PNG files.
All right, so the next question is, how do you download profiles for your camera? Steven specifically asked about the Fuji X-T2. The best way to do that is to download the free Adobe DNG converter. Let's see, I just grabbed those links and I'm gonna go ahead and put them in the chat for everybody. So you can download that. Once you have that installed, that'll install all of those profiles on your computer and you'll be able to access them from Luminar AI.
Now, Angela, on that one, Fuji and a couple of the Canon ones are a little tricky because Adobe stores them in several different places. So what you would be looking for, if you can't find it or Luminar doesn't see it automatically, is you'll search on your hard drive for DCP files. And there's a couple of places, or if you look at Adobe's website, they'll tell you where those are stored. But there's also third-party manufacturers who make those. And even some of the camera manufacturers offer those for download. The Adobe DNG converter is just one of the easiest ways to find it, because a DCP profile is a DNG camera profile, and Adobe invented DNG. Therefore, when you install their free DNG creator utility or converter utility, it's not just dependent. You don't need a Lightroom subscription or a Photoshop subscription. Adobe's behind the DNG format that a lot of mobile phones use and a lot of camera manufacturers use because it has some benefits.
All right, and then I don't know, for Steven's question, Carl has been responding to him and to Elizabeth. He wrote up a really great tutorial on how to add those profiles. So I know he was hoping to get a direct message from both of them and he can send those instructions. If there's anybody else who wants those instructions, email me at angela@stylem.com. I have the write-up as well and I can send those to you. So let's go ahead and click that one off. Let's see, Jan asked about tips for working with AI and Apple Photos. So I can go ahead and jump in on that one.
Let's make Vanelli do that one.
Sure. All right, let me get my screen set up here.
You are on a roll today.
You guys are getting slap happy. I think you might be tired. All right. So I've got Apple Photos up on my screen. These are my two boys, one of which is actually on my lap right now because he wants all of the attention. And I edited this on my iPhone and I just quickly shared it with friends and family. But what I'm going to do is go into edit. And what I can do here at the top is I can either take a look at my before, my after, or I can revert this to the original and do a new edit. If I want to edit this in Luminar AI, what I'll do is go up to this little ellipses button. This is my extension menu, and I'm going to choose Luminar AI. And that's going to launch this image within Apple Photos and bring Luminar AI. It'll open up right here inside of Photos. We'll give it a moment to launch.
And you didn't have to remove that when you reverted original. You can hand off any edits that you already did. But
True.
Angela, one of the reasons to remove that like you did is that sometimes it's not good to double process. So you're better off going back to the clean image. But if you did something you loved in Apple Photos and you just want one thing in Luminar, like maybe you did your black and white in Apple Photos, but you wanted to add the great glows in Luminar, you could hand off that file with the edits from Apple Photos.
Absolutely. I have found though that the ones that I edit on my phone, when I look at them on a larger screen, the edits are just, the edges aren't clean. Right. They're a little bit pixelated. They just don't look great. I can get a much better result if I re-edit it inside of Luminar. So let's go to Animal Friends here. These are some great templates for pets, and take a look at some of these options here. Faded looks pretty good. I think I like actually black tails. That looks pretty cute. So then I'll go over to edit. We'll do just a couple of quick things. I'm going to go to Composition AI. I'm going to change this to, let's do a 16 by 9. I think that works well for this image, and straighten this out just a touch. Maybe bring it in a little bit tighter. Not too much. Right about there. And I'll hit return on my keyboard to go ahead and commit that crop. And let's just add a little bit of extra structure and maybe a little bit of boost just to bring out a little bit more detail, not too much. I don't want to make it look crunchy. And now I have my edit here that I've done. I can click Save Changes. It'll take it right back into my Apple Photos library. And once Apple has a chance to sync everything up, it'll be available on all of my devices that I have synced up with iCloud.
And that is non-destructive. So if for some reason Angela changed her mind, she could just click that revert to original and it would go back to the original file. So it's a non-destructive workflow. It's amazing to me that Photoshop lets Luminar be non-destructive. Photos for Mac OS, or Apple Photos, depending on what you call it, lets it be non-destructive. Lightroom's the only one that insists on destructive editing. So, so this does work that way. And hopefully, people all the time say, oh, how do I move my whole photos library into Luminar? The short answer is don't. It's synced to the cloud. It's on your phone. It's on your computer. It integrates with your email. Just use Luminar as an extension. It works great.
Awesome. Hey, can I show you guys one? Because earlier in the topic, they were asking about why we don't go into the light module or the light tool and automatically set our profile. And one of the reasons I personally don't have to is right here, I already have it set to my camera, but I came down here where it says set as default for this camera. So now when an image comes in and it recognizes it as a Nikon D810 camera, it automatically sets this profile for me. And I think that's one thing a few people were missing, is the set that as your default for this camera.
Yeah, and that's not for all images. That's just when the metadata says, oh, that's the D810, and then it will use that profile.
Exactly. So if you have if you're shooting with different cameras, it's smart enough to know which camera is being used. And I'll stop sharing.
All right, so next question from Joe. Can I do things with masks, filters, and layers in Aurora HDR that I can't do in Luminar? Like things that I would do, like things I would eliminate or minimize the need to go to Lightroom or Photoshop?
Yes. I could show real quickly what that would look like here. So you kind of get an idea. Let me just open up an image real quick, and then I will share. So let's see here. This one looks good. So I'm going to open up that image and let me share my screen. So Luminar is an advanced single image editor, and it's also designed to, process raw files. So here's a mobile RAW. This was shot on a smartphone. And usually these don't have a lot of info. So while they're raw, they're not great. So you saw how quickly that opened, but this was shot on an iPhone, and I just shot using the Lightroom mobile app. And look at how that's what the iPhone would have done, and look at how it brought a lot of that detail out. But there's a few things in here that I'd like to tweak. So first off, you have the ability to add image layers here. You could add adjustment layers, image layers, or if it was a merged image, you could add the quote original image layer, and it puts another copy on there. That's useful because sometimes we'll like stack an image and combine them together. So there I did a lighten mode, but then I can also say, oh, add a luminosity mask. So the luminosity mask automatically masked out certain areas. So I could like invert that luminosity mask, and now look at what it did. So the luminosity mask, if you look at this really closely here, it's black. It initially selected the bright areas and left them. Then I reversed it. So now what I have is a second copy of the dark, noisy areas. And I could start to combine those using blending modes like this to just fill in those areas that were rough. So look at there, I could start stacking. Now, I'm hoping to see some other improvements here, but you also have some pretty powerful advanced tools that you can get in there to tweak. You could start to, make some edits there to combine. You can use multiple layers. It has a standalone single image file format. On the Mac side, it does support third-party filters. If you have other plugins, that's not available on the Windows side at this point, but we are seeing a lot of love for Aurora and requests for improvements, so we'll see where that goes. You do also have a few adjustments that you don't have in Luminar. So for example, you can make adjustment layers and reuse filters. So this gives you that flexibility to take advantage of certain tools. You will find LUTs. So this does give you the ability to add in, different recipes, and you'll see a handful of these built in, but you can load any additional LUTs yourself by just loading them into the LUT tool. You do have radiance. You also have a very nice polarizing filter, which is a nice way to sort of tackle skies. And then we've got a little bit of other things in there, including the adjustable gradient. So I like this tool. This allows me to sort of target an area, rotate this, and what I'm going to do here in this case is actually use it to create some shadows across the surface of this statue of Buddha. So I'm going to pull down at the bottom the exposure a little bit and also play with the shadow point, but pop the highlights so that the only thing getting darker is the brick. And I'll put a little bit of extra color in there with some vibrance, and we can warm that or cool it. And look at how I can make that really targeted adjustment there at the bottom. So it's a good tool for these sorts of things, for doing really advanced individual edits. And then you could just save off a high quality TIFF file that you open up in Luminar. Or if you're on the Mac version, as we showed before, you can invoke it as a plugin. So I think there's a lot of people who are very passionate about Aurora. About a third of the people that use Luminar actually use Aurora. And earlier today, when we ran a survey, half of the people here today said, oh yeah, I do use Aurora. So a lot of you who haven't tried it yet just may not be as familiar with it. So it's a cool tool, and I'll put the link to some of the education materials. It doesn't have its own community like AI Insiders, but there is a wealth of tutorials and videos on our website, and I'll put the link into the chat pod here in just a moment. Angela or V, are there anything else about Aurora that I left out since I've been talking for 14 hours and I might have forgotten something?
Question from Deb that Kevin answered, that can Aurora be used with a JPEG? Absolutely.
Yep.
But I would say you're going to get a better result if you use a raw file. There's just more data for it to work with, and you're going to get a better, cleaner result.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that?
A TIFF file is going to be better than a JPEG as well. So, but if you have to make the JPEG work, Yeah, I think you'd almost probably get better results at that point sticking with Luminar with structure and those things. But if you insist on handing off a JPEG, you could do it. And there are some benefits, right? It's not terrible at it. So, you know, you can go in and definitely process. We got some JPEGs in here. And so you could definitely make improvements. There we go. These are all JPEGs, right? So let's take this guy. And actually, here we go. That's a raw. That's a JPEG. Perfect. This is a low dynamic range scene. And, you know, it's got some challenges to it. So let's just open that up. We'll save that existing project. And it's going to look at the file. Now, it doesn't have as much that it can do compared to a raw file. But it does still support chromatic aberration reduction. And it's going to attempt to pull out all the details. So it's basically like letting the computer use AI and take 15 seconds to do its best. Some of you might remember PhotoLemur, which kind of did the same thing of like looking and fixing. And so before, after. Well, it actually brought out quite a bit of those muddy shadows there, didn't it? And that beautiful smart tone makes it easy to finesse the exposure further. And then a little bit of HDR clarity and a kiss of vibrance. And, you know, I'd call that a decent improvement for a JPEG file. Look at how some of those highlights are recovered and the muddy shadows were brought back to life.
Pretty good. Ed did ask if you could go over one more time how you converted the boat photo to black and white and then use soft light to get that kind of bleach bypass look.
Sure.
Was wondering what those steps were one more time.
Yeah, actually, we don't even, in Aurora here, all we could do there is something like this. You could just add an adjustment layer, strip out the color on that adjustment layer, and then feel free to play with any of your contrast tools, things like this to get kind of a nice black and white. And if you want it to be a glowy black and white, then just come down to image radiance. And, you know, this kind of creates this nice sort of dreamy black and white where you can get these cool highlights and really blooming. Like, look at how it blooms the highlights there. Then just change its blending mode. So something like soft light is excellent at creating a gentle effect, or overlay, and you see these different blending modes change how those layers mix. So there's that black and white blending technique, like that. And I love using that technique. And because it's a layer, you can go in and say, oh, hey, go ahead and do a brush or a radial mask or a luminosity mask. And, you know, luminosity masks are awesome like this because it'll look at the image, find the bright spots, and then help mask them. And, you know, sometimes what we're going to do is, you know, I like that there, but you might even experience just flipping it and you could see how that worked. And so it just kind of blends the results of that layer a little more subtly based upon the exposure value.
Awesome.
So there's your before and after sort of side by side. And again, folks, this was a JPEG. So Aurora is designed for raw files, but even JPEGs can benefit. But again, it's the problem solver. It's not the speed tool. Luminar is the creative speed tool. Aurora is the in-depth tool for doing advanced image repair or advanced editing.
Nice.
Awesome. All right, question from Cynthia on Lori and Shelley's infrared presets. Do they have to be used on an infrared photo? So short answer is yes, to get the intended effect. Small caveat is any of the templates can be used on any photo. So you can use a portrait template on a landscape. You can use a pet, one that's geared for pet photography on a landscape. You can use them on anything, but the results are maybe not going to be what the creator intended. So using those infrared presets on something other than an infrared photo is probably going to come up with some really strange results.
And Andrew,
I've put in the chat pod the Aurora HDR education links, and it has the user manual, videos, webinars, all sorts of things. So it'll help you.
Great.
Awesome.
Joe asks about Nikon Z7 II raw files in Aurora.
Yep.
Unfortunately, that is not yet supported. That camera is not yet supported. So what you would need to do is go to the Adobe DNG converter, those links that we shared a little bit ago. I can grab them and share them one more time.
Or open it in Luminar first, and then just export 16-bit TIFFs.
That'll work just as well. So those are a couple of options for you until we get some new camera support in Aurora. And let's see. Question, can we go from Lightroom to Aurora and then Luminar AI? So
yes, we did that before.
Not
so
in one step though.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I guess you could,
but
in
a Mac you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
I typically would have gone from Lightroom to Aurora, then back to Lightroom, and then to Luminar AI. I mean, that's typically how
you can't go from plugin to plugin. You can't go plugin to plugin if you're using it as a plugin, but you can always right-click and reveal the file and open it in the next app, and then save it and then open that in the next app. But a plugin cannot invoke a plugin. But what I would do is this. I would just go to Photoshop, where you have the ability to use smart objects. And so just take your raw file and say photo, edit in Photoshop as a smart object. And now it's going to open that raw file up with all the raw data tucked inside the Photoshop layer. And you can run Luminar AI and Aurora as Photoshop plugins and use that to enhance your images.
Excellent.
That would be the way I do that.
Okay. Deb would like to know if there's a plugin option for AC/DC. No, there is not. Do you guys know if you can use Photoshop plugins with AC/DC? I know it wouldn't be officially supported, but would they work at all?
Some work. AC/DC, though, really, and the more newer versions of AC/DC, they've moved away from some of the PSD support. So that's on them. They're not using a standard plugin format. So yeah, so not great integration, but with any tool, you can always export that 16-bit TIFF file and then just open it up. So, and that's the same thing I say with Capture One. Just export the 16-bit TIFF, open it in Luminar or open it in Aurora, save it in the same location, and then AC/DC or Capture One can just scan that same folder, just like Luminar does, and it will update and see the new file.
Excellent. Gord asked how to create a diptych. Vanelli actually did a great coffee break episode a little while back on how to create a triptych. I grabbed the link for that. I put that in the chat. So take a look at that. That should walk you through it. It's a little bit more of a process than I think we can get into tonight, but have a look at that coffee break video and let us know if you have any questions. Richard asked, if you are in curves and make an adjustment you do not like, is there a way to undo the curve adjustment, or do you have to reset the curve? I think you can just double click on the handle that you moved, right?
Yep, I could show that really quick. So that's the same in just about every tool. So, if you go in to make a curves adjustment, and folks, before you worry about curves, I just want to emphasize, don't be afraid of Accent AI. It does so much of that stuff without having to fight with things. But if you do decide to use curves, they're down here at the bottom of the light tool. So, let's say you were kind of working and, you were pulling with that. Double click just removes the individual points. So this would be a good example where, there's too much blue in the highlights. So what I could do there is go after the blue and see, we can add or subtract the blue there, and so you got to be careful not to be too aggressive, but look at how we tone down the blue to kind of remove that color cast. And if you see something incorrect, you just double click and it's going to remove it, and you could still add those. So what I always suggest is the classic S curve, drag straight up on that line and then straight down on this line. And that gives you that classic S curve for contrast. And then it's very easy to shift your curve or crush your curve if you're trying to use that. If you're a curves fan, for using it for some linear, not linear, but scaled gamma like this, where you get that nice S curve for a gamma. And a lot of people do like that. So use those lines, use these arrows, drag straight up and down on the target. It works great. But if you screw it up, just double click and it removes each dot.
Excellent. Ismail asks, are you saying JPEGs should not be used in Luminar AI? Carl gave a great answer there in the Q&A, but you can absolutely use JPEGs in Luminar AI. You're just not going to have quite as much editing flexibility as you would with a raw file. Raw files contain a ton more data, and you're going to be able to move those sliders farther without getting artifacts such as grain and noise and banding and things like that. You're going to get those sooner with a JPEG because there's just not as much data there to work with. But you can absolutely use them.
And Angela, I'm gonna be the nerd who actually opens up a spreadsheet for a moment to explain this, because and we're gonna pretend that these numbers are dollars for a moment, and this will make it absolutely clear to everyone. Because I used to be in that camp of like, well, I'm shooting time lapse, I have to shoot JPEG because I just can't afford those bigger memory cards. And I had a chance to work with Vincent LaFerre for a week where it was my job to teach him about After Effects, and he taught me about time lapse. Like, we swapped knowledge. It was beautiful and fun. And he just looked at me and he said, let me get this straight. You go out and you get up in the middle of the morning or the middle of the night, you stand out in deserts and you shoot these images, and you don't want to spend a couple of extra bucks on a memory card or a hard drive, and you're willing to give up that quality. But people are like, well, I don't understand. What do you mean the quality? So let's do this here really quickly with just a spreadsheet so it's absolutely clear. So a JPEG image is an 8-bit file. That means that we have 2 to the 8th power. So 2 to the 8th power is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. You do that 8 times, right? So let me make sure I got that right. So 1. And so when you do that, 2 to the 8th power basically equals 256, right? So you've probably seen that before on a histogram, right? It goes from 0 to 255. That's because it's an 8-bit file. Well, raw files can be 10-bit files. So that would be times 2 here, because that would be, 2 more times. And a 10-bit file has 1024. And a lot of raw files are actually going to be this times 2, right? I'm sorry, let me do that again. So 1024 times 2. And you're thinking, well, that's not that much bigger. But here's the thing. It's like compounding interest on a bad credit card that nobody ever explained to you when you were in college. So what's going to happen here, if I could do my spreadsheet right, is basically this. So 1024, let me just do that the easy way. 1024 times 2. So this is a 12-bit RAW file. And a lot of cameras have 14-bit RAW files. But V, how many color channels are there in an image? RGB, right? So that's in the blue, the green, and everything else. So here's what that means. So if we have 256 in our JPEG file, and 256 in the green channel, and 256 in the blue channel, well, that means that we've got a possibility here of this. So we say this is this number times this number times this number. And hang in here, guys, because this is going to make a lot of sense to you. And that's 16 million colors. And you go, oh my gosh, 16 million colors, that's amazing. Except that's why you actually see the banding in all of the issues. So now you step up to the 10-bit RAW file. And V, just do me a favor, check your camera. This isn't like a man comparison here of comparing things, but I bet your camera is at least 12-bit. Almost all RAW files are 12-bit these days. And so now, as we do this math, oh, wait, what does that mean? Well, this means that these are actually going to be not millions of colors, but billions of colors. And if you don't know the difference between 16 million and 1 billion, then please start sending me your paycheck. And now you go to RAW files that are 12-bit, and you're going to very quickly see the insanity here. But what this means is that you now have amazing exposure recovery and highlight recovery. This is why Alaya was talking about it's now possible to effectively cheat like never before. Because now that 12-bit RAW file is 66 billion levels of detail, as opposed to 16,000. So 8-bit versus 10-bit versus 12-bit. JPEGs are a necessary evil, so you can post your images to Instagram and Facebook, but they should be avoided at all cost as a capture format. If you don't have an alternative because it's a hand-me-down camera or it's all you got, or you hit the wrong button on your phone and you shot a JPEG by mistake, so be it. Luminar will absolutely help you. But Vanelli, Angela, who wants to take the $16 million pile? Anybody want that one? B, would you like the 66 billion or the $1 billion paycheck this time?
Oh, I'll take the 16 billion.
The 66 billion? Yeah, okay.
I'll take
So,
the 68 billion.
Doug, I call dibs on the $16 billion paycheck.
okay, no problem. So if you think about those as dollars, all of a sudden now you have a different relationship to it than, oh, it's just like pixels or something. I don't know. Sorry to be a nerd there, but I hope that
you, Rich, you were actually one who got me to convert over from 8-bit to
Yep.
16-bit.
Yep, makes a world of difference.
All right. Stephen would like to know if we have any advice on getting clients in the first place. He's enjoying his local camera club and wondering how to take the next step to become someone with paying clients. That is a huge question. You know, sometimes it's a matter of, you know, building a portfolio, build a website, start sharing your website, start letting people know that you have prints for sale if you're wanting to sell prints. If you're wanting to start shooting, you know, portraits, weddings, things like that, start, you know, hang out your shingle, let people know that that's what you want to do, and make sure you have a good portfolio and good website for them to come to. Do you guys have any other quick tips?
I'm going to add one more thing to that, Angela, which is don't give your work away for free to people who should be paying, but do give your work away to nonprofits. So I'm a board member for the Scouts BSA program here in Washington, D.C., and I volunteer both a lot of photography time and video time and other things, but I meet other people who own businesses who can hire me or work with me, and I don't mind giving my work away to a nonprofit. And even if you're just getting started, you could find nonprofits for all sorts of things you're passionate about. And it lets you build up your portfolio with real world work experience that they're going to use and print and publish. And eventually they may even be in a capacity to occasionally pay you a little bit here or there. But it's so much better if you're going to be giving your work away to free, to be giving it away to a nonprofit rather than the scummy people who just keep going around to all the new emerging artists and say, well, you know, I've never worked with you before. Why don't you just let me try you out and see how it works? Because they pull that same line of BS on the next 5 people over the next 5 months.
You know, Rich, I had a person do that to me once, and they said, well, you know, could you do this shoot for free? And I said, I'll tell you what I will do. I'll do the shoot for free. All I need is a $2,400 retention. So if you give me that payment up front, I'll do this shoot for free. But now that with all this extra work you're telling me I'm going to get, we'll take it out of the money that you're going to pay me today for the $2,400. And I didn't hear back from them. So
because they never were going to hire you anyways.
Exactly. So I did put in the chat, Brian Essler, I thought was genius during COVID. He said, you're struggling as a photographer. Well, so were other people. And he went around and helped out a lot of business people with their headshots. And now that they're back in business, he's been working nonstop. I thought that was genius that he did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you can find some way to get connected with an organization that you can help to build your portfolio. Like I know several people who do amazing pet and wildlife photography, and they volunteer at their local humane society to photograph adoptable pets. So that's a great way to get into that space if that's something that you're interested. So lots of great tips there. Michael asked,
Norm's question's real easy.
Sure.
Yeah. So Norm, yes, Windows had a major update, been rolling out for a few weeks now. So if you need to swap your license, just go to skylum.com, log into your account, and just hit reset. And then on your laptop, like you just suggested, you can have it to your laptop. There it is.
And yes, before any of you ask, I do really have 20 activations of Luminar AI because I use a lot of machines and computers. But this is also where you can buy more seats. And so if you need to, you could buy additional activations for $20 a seat. Local currency may be slightly different, but you don't need another activation if you're not using that computer. So if you had a computer stolen or lost, or you took it in for work and they came back and they said, oh, we had to replace your logic board, well, then it's technically a different computer. Just log in like Vanelli said, click on activations and reset it, and you're good to go.
Yep. All right, so question from Michael. Any plans for a scanning interface? I'm guessing no, but
Same
that doesn't mean
That's
that,
the exact same answer that I gave for printers.
Yep.
Two
If
more.
Even
there's
Photoshop
something-
doesn't have a scanning interface anymore. So just use the software from your printer. I use the Canon. I have a Canon scanner sitting right here. I use it all the time. And it just makes beautiful, high quality 16-bit TIFF files that Luminar can open all day long.
Yep. Let's see here. Stephen asked if there's a video or instructions for doing the up to 10 textures. Stephen, I'll grab the user guide link to local masking for you. That's where you're going to find on how to add those. And you just add, when you go to add a local mask, you can choose basic or you can choose texture. Just choose texture and you can add up to 10 of those. And you just locate the texture you want to use on your hard drive and layer them up. So I'll grab that link for you here in just a second. And Dana asks again about the iPad version. I know we've covered this a handful of times, but we are starting to work on developing for mobile, but that's about all we can say right now.
Good. Did we seriously make it to the end of all the questions? No one's going to, oh, there's another one.
One more. Let me go ahead and grab that link. I will let one of you guys answer that one.
Sure. The last one's real simple there. So a couple things here. Will all the links be available after Big Deep Dive? So not sure which links you mean, but I'm going to paste the ones I gave out earlier. And these were some of the ones we gave out for some of the freebies. And if you also go there, so here's what'll happen. Most of these things are live in the AI Insiders community, but we're giving them away temporarily. They might be sold in the future or they might be taken down. So I would suggest you go and download them and hold them. But a couple things. These freebies I've been giving away are things that I created on my own. Like a lot of the stuff that's in Luminar, I've helped make. So's Vanelli and Angela, a lot of the LUTs and some of the templates. So we've worked on those, but these are just some extras that we haven't productized yet. So we're giving these away and they're fun stuff for you to play with. So you can definitely access that. And if you go into AI Insiders and you just search on the word free, you will find, some different stuff pop up that's still there. So again, just go to AI Insiders. And if you haven't joined yet, you can go to insiders.skylum.com. I'm just going to check really quick here and see if there's any of you sitting in the approval queue. We just review this periodically. And so I see that there's 2 people waiting to join. So, we'll check your email, that's fine. Then we hit approve and you're in. But if everything is searchable, there's a giant search box up here. So if I just type in free, you're going to see, oh, there's that free ebook. Well, there's Marilyn free. You can't download Marilyn, but she's just along for the ride here. But there's free light leaks and free grit textures, free sky objects, free ebook. So some of these things are not free, but there's other people here, asking for comments, but that helps. But if you say, oh, show me things with the word free that were posted by, and you could go through and you could see different things here, right? So this allows you to target and say, oh, I want to see posts. And now posts are going to help you narrow that down. And so that's just a couple of ways you could do it, or you can search on things and just go in there and download, and you'll see the downloads there. Sometimes we put little videos to help you understand how they work. But just remember, these are not officially supported products. So if you contact support, they're not going to be able to help you. But we did have all the instructions here. So if you want to learn how to use it, you can get it. We did release 2 ebooks today that I'd really encourage you to download. So these are brand new. You guys are getting them first, actually. So we had that awesome ebook where 6 photographers share their shooting tips, including Darlene and Michelle, who you heard from today. So you're going to want to check that out, and you could download that ebook. And then you also heard from Nicole Young earlier today, and she's got how to edit landscape and nature photos. And this also has hands-on exercise files and some videos that are linked in it that are custom. So we encourage you to pull those down. Those may in the future be sold or used for special promotions, but we're letting you have access to them first. And that's the way we run the Insiders community. We try to let you have special things for free from time to time, just to say thank you for being passionate about our product. And what we love is when you're able to go out into the world, into your photo clubs or on social media, and when someone says, oh, Luminar can't do that, you go, oh yeah, it does. Let me show you. Or, oh, you have to buy this $300 product for that. No, I could do that this way. Boom. We just want you guys to really love this and get the most from it. So these are some just fun things we put together to help you out.
A couple of other quick questions that popped up. Which giveaways are new from Deep Dive 1? I know the ebooks are new, and there was a grit texture, or was that a template pack?
The grit texture is new. The ebooks are new. And I also have another set of LUTs I was in the process of getting up. There was about 2 or 3 more things that I didn't get a chance to post today that I'll be posting to insiders over the next couple of weeks, mostly LUTs. And I got a couple of new LUTs, including a set of decades LUTs. So if you've ever looked in Luminar, you might have noticed a couple of LUTs that have a year, right? So these are some LUTs that I made. And if you take a look, and why is the sky blue? Because of the way that the light reflects and the way that color happens and a couple of other things. I'm trying to get rid of that window. There we go. So if you went into the mood tool, you might have noticed before that there were some colors, or sorry, some years in here, right? So you're like, oh, 1960, 1990. You might have been wondering, wow, are those the only 2 good years, right? Like, the faded 60s and the rich color from the 90s. Well, if you load these decades LUTs that I was just getting ready to start posting, there's the decades LUTs. You actually get the missing years. And so these were ones that I built based upon analyzing different colors. And so that's going to allow you to pull that. So let me just go in here really quick. Sorry, I'm at that day demo library, toolkit, lookup tables, decades, 1965, 1970, 75, 80, 85, and 95. So yes, so all those missing LUTs up to the year 2000 are going to be available to you a little bit later. I'll probably get those up sometime tomorrow. But that'll fill it in. And so you'll see things like the 1970s look or 1975. And again, you could use the contrast slider on that LUT and the amount just to dial in these color recipes to do some transformations. So there's some different fun ones there that you could play with. And it's going to give you like that look of 1985 color. And what I did to build these was I took a lot of images that were developed and printed at certain times, and I studied the color to sort of match the color science. And so you can see here that 1985, those pictures have a tendency to fade pink over time. And so what we did here is we kind of like took that faded color look because in the 80s, they were doing some really cheap printing processes, and those pictures lost their color values over time and went pink. So you'll find some fun stuff in there to play with.
Awesome. All right, quick question from Elizabeth. Is there a background replacement tool in Luminar AI? Not at this time. And Francois says, I have Photoshop CC 2021 and can't get the plugin to load for Luminar AI.
Windows
on a Mac? Go ahead,
Windows.
You owe me a Coke.
Yeah. if he's Windows,
He's
he's a Mac. That's you, Rich.
All right, that one's easy. So you probably have an M1 Mac. So if yours is a newer Mac, you're going to want to go to skylum.com/support and download the M1 native version of the plugin that allows it to run. And if for some reason that's not the issue, then just go ahead and quit Photoshop, launch Luminar. And one of the easiest things you could do all day long is in Luminar, you've got the ability to run the plugin installer. And basically, you would go into your plugin installer and first uninstall the plugin, then reboot your machine, then reinstall the plugin, and do that without Photoshop or Lightroom running. And that kind of removes the plugin. The reboot sort of refreshes things on your computer, and then you could reinstall it, and that would help as well. But in your case, it sounds like you need the M1 version of it, and just go to skylum.com/support.
And Rich, seriously, LZW, you knew exactly what the acronym, what each of those.
Well, dude, when you have to write books, no, I actually, here it is, Lempel, Ziv, and Welch. I remember the first one. It's in Wikipedia, dude. It means it's true. According to my son, if it's in Wikipedia, it's official. No, but it is. It's a 3 scientists here, and it's really cool.
My God.
It allows you to really optimize those TIFFs. And remember, guys, like a lot of people are freaked out about TIFF. TIFF and PSD is the same file format. Adobe actually owns the TIFF format and owns the PSD format. There's nothing different between a layered TIFF and a layered PSD, except a layered TIFF actually takes up less disk space. I am such a nerd. I'm sorry.
Did you know that, Angela? That
I did
part
not.
didn't
I actually
know.
thought it was the other way around.
That's what I
learned
thought.
something today.
Layered TIFFs with LZW are about 30% more efficient than a PSD file.
All right.
Oh.
So the last question, Richard would like to know, who is more tired?
Well, I will say, I followed Richard's instructions, and in between, I ate, I called my sister, I relaxed a little bit, and I come back and ease like when it was supposed to be my turn.
I didn't call your sister, but I called my wife, and I took my dog for a walk. So folks, we're sorry to sort of devolve here. Some of you are still hanging out. I hope you actually see a couple of things from this. One, passionate artists and really great people work at Skylum, and they want to make your life better. They want you to love your photos and have fun with this. Two, the next time you're online and someone just talks about how like, oh, all those people at Skylum want to do is take your money. They don't do this, they don't do that. Here's the thing, guys. We are trying to make a cutting edge product. It is the only raw photo editor on the planet that does what it does. And we're trying to push the envelope here. Sometimes that means that we push it too hard, and you see that every release is focusing on speed and performance and smoothing over those rough spots and making it better. We do really care. And you met a lot of great passionate folks today. And you also probably saw that just because the tool doesn't do it the way you know how to do it, because you've always done it that way in Photoshop and Lightroom, doesn't mean it can't be done. So one of the things today that I love that Elias said is, would you do it the same way you've been doing it for 15 years if you didn't have a better way to do it? So be open-minded. And that's something that working at Skylum has really taught me, which is just because I insist it has to be done one way doesn't mean that there's not a million different ways. And sometimes there could be a better way to solve a problem. Did we finish, guys? Did we cross the finish line? I see one more Q&A.
It was just a
Oh, it was just a thank you. Well, thank you, Edward, for coming out too.
For terrific day and mountains of information.
Awesome.
So
And
lots of
before we
thank
say
yous. Thank
goodbye,
you all
I want
for
to say
staying
thank you
with
to
us.
Doug, our producer, who's helped organize this event, as well as Hillary and Allie, who were serving as assistant producers. Just so you guys all could appreciate this, not only did Doug put together this event, but he also helped put together some of the different language events and worked with other teammates. But Doug lives on the West Coast, which meant that Doug got up at 3 a.m. today to work with us, and he's been here for the entire time. So while some of us went and had lunch, so let's give Doug a round of applause for all of his hard work of keeping the ship moving in the right direction.
Thank you, everybody. I was getting ready to pipe in closing time. Turn up the bar light.
Good. All right, guys. Well, we don't have an exact date for the next deep dive, but it will be a couple of weeks after we ship update 4. And so the working plan is sometime that's still considered summertime. We'll have update 4 and the next deep dive. So we'll have more information on that soon. And the next time you get an email saying, we'd like your feedback, make sure you take it, because Eugene sends out these amazing surveys where you get to vote on what tools are going to go into the next version of Luminar. And he even gives you a sneak peek of what they're thinking about. Angela, great job tonight. Vanelli, I don't want to have the last words here. So V, I'm going to pass to you, and then we're going to let Angela have the last words. Anything you want to say to folks on the way out the door, V?
No, it was awesome. Your excitement and energy feeds us. And this gets us excited to keep doing what we're doing. And I'm really excited to have Angela, my co-host here, doing a killer job. Great job, Angela.
Thanks,
Yeah, great.
guys.
Awesome. Angela, anything you want to say? Well, you get to say the goodbye.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us, especially for those who stuck with us for hours upon hours. You guys are rock stars, and to the entire team who made this happen. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you on the next one. Hope to see you on a coffee break soon as well. Bye, everyone.